Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining, for giving up your lunch hour for those people who's that time of the day. I'm Andrew Megginson. I'm Head of Service for the Local Plan Service within the Planning Inspectorate, and I'm joined by...
I'm Simon Berkeley. I'm an Inspector and I'm the Professional Lead for Local Plans here at the Planning Inspectorate.
Okay, thanks, Simon. So in terms of the aim of the session, the welcome, we've got a number of sort of topics that we want to go through. We've got an agenda. We've got about an hour and a half in total. We're going to talk for around about 60 minutes or so, and then we've also got a time for questions. So importantly, there's an opportunity for you to ask questions via the Q&A panel in Teams. Feel free to ask questions at any time during the presentation. We've got a team of people behind the scenes, senior inspectors, some of our operational colleagues who may be able to answer those as we go, but we will try and sort of summarise the key questions that are asked at the end of the session as well. So please use the upvote button as well. So if there's a question which is kind of gathering some traction that people want to answer and want us to answer, should I say, then please use the vote up button as well in that. Also, just a plea at the end of the session within the question, there's also something we're going to do around a poll as well. I think there'll be a theme that I'll certainly illustrate during the webinar around engagement, around the importance of you engaging with us, but also in the importance of us engaging with you as change is coming through the new reform process, and also as we get an increasing amount of plans landing with us. If you're seeing issues, problems, things you want to discuss with us, then feel free to do that, and we'll talk about how we do that. We've got a poll at the end where we're keen to get your thoughts on future topics we might want to do. We're really keen to do more in this, particularly where it drives swifter examinations and gets your evidence base stronger in terms of preparation for examination. So we'll come back to that, but that engagement theme will be something I'll run throughout the presentation. Okay, in terms of setting the scene, many people on the call will obviously be from a local plan background, from local authority, policy teams preparing local plans. So a fairly stark statistic, I think, Simon, isn't it, in a sense that we've only got 27% of local authorities have current up-to-date local plan, and the map on the side has been used in various guises by MHCLG to sort of illustrate that point. So 73% of local plan authorities lack an up-to-date local plan. We've certainly seen, haven't we, lots of sort of ministerial interest in this area, and obviously fairly integral to the government's overall plan, particularly in terms of a plan-led system to deliver 1.5 million homes. So certainly a lot of focus and sort of ministerial interest in this area. Also MHCLG talking to us on the importance of this, hence the webinar and lots of other things that you'll see follow over the coming weeks and months. In terms of kind of looking at the step change ahead, I thought this was quite an important slide for us to sort of illustrate early on, because it gives a sense of sort of what's coming down the line in terms of demand, in terms of PINs. Obviously, my role is much more on the operational side, so looking at kind of how we resource the challenges and how we actually deliver these examinations and how we work with you as local authorities. Obviously, there's a strong local authority audience today to deliver that. So just give you a sense of background. 2023-24, we examined 18 plans. Last year, that figure grew to 44. So far this year, we've got 12 plans in for examination with the expectation of another 30 on the way. But the really kind of start number on that slide is 117 plans planned for submission between, and it says 26-27, but it's actually shorter than that, because it's actually from the 1st of April to the end of December, the sort of notional December cut-off date that's been communicated within the existing plan system. So that's an unprecedented number for us. And a real plea from me, I think, and what we're seeing and what our inspectors are seeing, is obviously how we actually sort of resource that challenge. Myself and Simon have been heavily involved in recruitment campaigns. We've grown our inspector base within local plans considerably to try and meet that challenge. And there'll be more recruitment probably early next year that we're looking to do as well. But I think you as local authorities can really help us here in terms of being really clear and engaged with us on when you think you are going to submit your plan, particularly if you're looking at the existing system or are thinking of moving into the new system. And Simon will update you a little bit more on that. But that engagement is really, really key. We're looking at going out, I think it's towards the end of October. We'll be coming back to you to look at an updated submission. And what we're really keen to do is we've seen a pattern of local authorities pushing that back and back. So this time last year, we were looking at 70 plans this year, 70 plans next year. Now it's 42, 117. So that's shifting more towards the back end. Appreciate there may be things that you want to use, have more time to plan. If there's things we can help work with you on and unblock earlier, we can talk about advisory visits and their use later, then please do that. That's a really important thing for us. We need to try and manage this demand curve. We're resourcing up, but it would really help if you can get your plan in November as opposed to December. That's a significant opportunity for us to be able to pick that up quicker and earlier. So please bear that in mind as well. So thanks for that, and I'll hand over to Simon.
I was going to say, just for on that, Andrew. Yeah, so two things that we're probably going to say quite a bit this afternoon is number one, please keep in touch with us, keep us updated with where you are with your plan making. And I think the other one is probably around, well, look, so the planning inspectorate has a very clear statutory function, but we recognise that, now is a particularly kind of difficult time, particularly, not exclusively, but particularly for local authorities. And we're kind of looking to sort of step out of that statutory box, if you like, if I can put it that way, to do all we can within the sort of the resource that we have available to be able to assist. So that is something we're going to come on to a little bit more later on as well, but I thought it was just worth maybe putting it out there early doors.
Yeah, it's something that we're spending an awful lot of time and energy on, looking at how we deliver that amount of resource and deliver those examinations quickly.
Okay, so let's talk then a little bit about pre-submission preparation, and hopefully we've got a few words that might just help you to sort of get it right first time. I mean, some of the stuff I'm going to say here will be pretty obvious to the more seasoned amongst you, but hopefully will nonetheless serve as a kind of a sort of helpful reminder. So two things I want to start with first, and I'm going to talk about legal compliance and soundness. And the reason I'm focusing on those is because that is what your inspector will be focusing on when you get to the examination stage. So legal compliance, first of all, then, you'll know that there are a number of sort of legal requirements, legal provisions that you need to meet in order to have a successful examination. And I just wanted to touch on a few of these. I mean, these aren't new, and neither are the soundness tests. This is all stuff that's been around for quite a long time, so I'm not going to dwell too long. But yeah, first up, what I want to say is these things you need to really kind of have front and center of in your mind from the minute you start preparing your plan. And I'll maybe touch on that in a minute, but rather than starting to think about how you sort of justify stuff right at the very end before you submit. So that's going to be one of my key messages today. So statement of community involvement compliance. I think the message there is, do proper consultation, as the slide says, and do make sure, always have that firm eye on your statement of community involvement, your SCI, and make sure that you do exactly what it is that you've committed to do, because frankly, if you haven't, that will get flushed out at the examination point. And may well result in sort of delay while you have to go back and do further consultation work. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention there. The duty to cooperate, I'm going to leave for now because I've got another slide about that specifically in a moment. And sustainability appraisal can often be a bit of an issue when it comes to examination. So, do make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, as it were, when it comes to SA, and that you have given thought to what the reasonable alternatives were, and that you've genuinely assessed them in your essay. I think that's another kind of common thing, a common theme, if you like, for examination, is complaints from others about, well, there was this alternative over here. It was perfectly reasonable, but hasn't been assessed in the essay. So please do sort of make sure that you do that. I'm going to turn this then specifically and explicitly to the duty to cooperate. The reason for that, I mean, it might not have escaped your notice that the DTC, as we call it for short, has been a significant issue in a number of examinations of late. And this is a critical legal requirement. And the reason it's critical is because it's the one thing, the one solitary thing that your inspector is legally incapable of rectifying, of remedying for you at examination. So it's really, really important, I can't emphasize this enough, that you get the duty to cooperate right. And I think, you know, that starts right from the very beginning of plan making. And I think what I want to say is, you know, I would suggest, as many authorities do, you know, getting the structures for doing that engagement right, right from the beginning of the process. So do set up, you know, sort of DTC officer level groups with neighbouring authorities and others that you need to engage with under the duty, and as well do get, you know, senior officers involved, and also, and you know, just as importantly, getting that political buy-in as well, getting the relevant politicians involved in the duty to cooperate as well, I think is probably a good idea. You know, politicians don't like last-minute surprises. So, you know, if they've been engaged in the process right from the very beginning, then that can help, I think, sort of pave the way to having that sort of genuine high-level dialogue that you need to be having with neighbouring authorities. The other thing I want to say on the duty is, you know, it's an ongoing requirement, which to me means it makes a lot of sense to keep clear records as you go along through the process. So, you know, as you are having those meetings, do make sure that what you have discussed, and importantly, what the outcomes of those meetings were, are all sort of properly documented. You can have a kind of living document. And that you update every time you have an addition, you know, you have a further meeting
agendas, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
all of that.
That's right, because we do quite often see plans being examined where we just don't have the actual evidence. Ultimately, you know, it's because they haven't. It's about documentation.
Yeah.
They have actually done the engagement, but simply haven't documented it either at all or particularly well, and need to do further work on it. So even if, you know, in those situations where it's ultimately successful, it still causes a very early delay. So yeah, as with those legal requirements, as I say, tests of soundness, these aren't new, so I'm not going to linger too long on them. But the one thing I did want to say is, again, you know, these are things that, frankly, these are the four things that your inspector is going to be entirely focused on at your examination. So again, you need to be just as focused on them right from the beginning of plan making. So, you know, as you are putting your evidence base together, as you are putting your plan together, do keep thinking, right, well, okay, this work that we're doing here now, how does that relate to the test of soundness? How does that look in relation to the tests of soundness? You know, this proposal we've got over here, what precisely is our justification for that? And again, you know, document that right from the very beginning, and then if there's a change to the proposal, well, okay, what's the justification for it? Keep thinking about these tests of soundness, and I think, you know, as a team, as a local authority team putting the plan together, I think it's quite helpful to sort of, you know, challenge each other in a way, really, as you build your plan.
Good reference point, that, isn't it? Just to come back to the core principles.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, because this stuff has been around for a very long time, I think we almost kind of forget it. We sort of take it for granted, and you can always be a kind of bit complacent. So I think it helps, if you work as a team in an office, if anyone does that anymore, I'm not entirely sure, but if you do that, have a great big poster on the wall of what the tests of soundness are, just to keep everyone thinking about them. Evidence base. Yeah, so it's an absolutely, obviously, I don't need to tell you this, probably an essential part of plan making and building your plan and putting it together. You will, I'm sure, be very, very familiar with, I've just got on the slide here a bit of a list. Obviously, that's not going to be all the evidence that you're going to need. There will be much more besides. But the key message I want to leave you with here is really about keeping it up to date and proportionate. On the up to date point, we do often see, particularly, I have to say, one notable example, I suppose, is in relation to Egyptian traveller accommodation assessments. And we do very frequently see very out of date GTAAs. And that will cause you an immediate delay to your examination because it does need to be up to date. Yeah, proportionate. I think this is something that kind of challenges us all, really. We all talk about, we need to have a proportionate evidence base, and I think that's right. The difficulty here, though, is in defining exactly what proportionate looks like. And the reason it's difficult is because it's going to be different, I think, for every authority, what's going on in that authority, and also, what the plan is actually proposing. So it's quite a difficult thing, that really. But again, what I want to say here is, I understand why authorities might be a little bit cautious, I suppose, when it comes to what is in the evidence base and what lengths any individual piece of evidence needs to go to. That caution being around, it has to be able to convince the inspector, and I completely understand that. But I think that the sort of scales are kind of tipping a little bit towards a trend of, if it moves, assess it. And that's not really what we're looking for. So you really do need to give quite a bit of thought in relation to what proportionate looks like for you. So, just a couple of sort of common kind of pitfalls. I've already touched on, insufficient or out of date evidence, as I say, particularly in relation to GTAAs, but not exclusively GTAAs. Essay potential weaknesses in essays in relation to the consideration of alternatives. Well, duty to cooperate issues I've also touched on already, and as I have said, those clearly can be fatal. Well, if there are shortcomings in relation to the duty to cooperate, there is a high risk that that's fatal to the progress of your plan through examination and then on to adoption. Delivery assumptions, particularly in relation to housing, also, does need careful consideration, and do be realistic about those, and talk to the land promoters, the lined up site developers, house builders, if there are any, about what delivery might realistically actually look like. Missing or inadequate assessments. Integration between evidence and policies. I think maybe one example here might be around site selection. So I've done a number of examinations, for example, where it hasn't been clear at all precisely how the authority has gone about looking at the whole basket of sites that it had kind of available, how it's chosen the ones that are actually proposed. So, do make sure that there is that clear link between your evidence and then the policies that you have in the plan, so that your inspector ultimately can see very quickly and easily how you've got from A to B. So, yeah. I'm going to look now at sort of during the examination and some things that you might want to think about as you're going into as you're submitting and going into the examination process. So what I'm showing here is, well, it says a typical examination process. I kind of wish it was typical. I'm not sure that it is, but it's certainly
a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in truth,
yeah.
It's the ideal process. It often can get far less linear and rather more complicated than that. But these are the sort of fundamental building blocks, if you like. So, on receiving your plan, your inspector will have a period of initial assessment. So that is reading the plan, reading the evidence, reading the representations, getting everything clear in his or her head, which may well lead to a stage between number 1 and number 2 on the slide. If there are any initial queries, questions, concerns, your inspector will write to the local authority. That is relatively kind of early on. But assuming everything's all fine and dandy, the first sort of main step that you will see the inspector taking is setting out what we call matters, issues, and questions, or MIQs. And those are the issues that then define the scope of the examination going forward. So in response to MIQs, that's where you, as the local authority, and indeed anybody else wishing to participate in the examination, gets to set out their thoughts in written statements. And I'm going to come on, I'll park that there because I'm going to come on to statements shortly. Then hearing sessions, which are, key. The hearing sessions are a key point, really, in the examination process. And it's quite surprising how often issues that, you hadn't picked up on, I'm sort of drawing on my own experience here, how often I've turned up to a hearing session and issues that weren't kind of like previously obvious to me become really quite strongly emphasised or very much to the fore during the hearing session.
Passionate in terms of what's drawn out.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's absolutely right. And also, I don't know, I think it's that kind of verbal communication. You get a different kind of context and understanding than you do just with a written page and black and white, if that makes sense. So that's a key part of the examination process, absolutely. So do prepare, and I'm going to come on to that as well shortly. Then following the hearing sessions, there will undoubtedly be a need to draw up main modifications. I don't think I'm not sure that there has been. There might have been one examination with no main modifications whatsoever, but more often than not, there will be quite a good number of main modifications that are needed. Then the inspector's final report following consultation on those main modifications, and then hopefully in this ideal process anyway, onto adoption. So, sorry, this is you, Andrew.
Over to me, yeah. Again, yes, part of that kind of examination process and stages. Obviously, you'll all be familiar with the Minister's letter that was released last year. I think universally it's the pragmatism letter that sort of set out sort of how we look at assessing plans. So I think this kind of for us effectively raised the bar slightly in terms of the plan quality at submission stage. And I think we've been very clear that the presumption on us is not being able to fix fundamental problems during the examination that are going to take an inordinate amount of time. So I think kind of a lot of work that we're doing in terms of, I guess, the focus of this webinar, other things we'll do is about making sure plans are ready for examination. There's something later in the presentation that you've probably just seen announced yesterday around a checklist process prior to receipt of material for examination. So all of that is trying to sort of, use an opportunity for us to actually be hit the ground running more with an examination that's going to go through all those stages without fundamental blockers, I guess. So I suppose that letter was a bit of a game changer in a way, wasn't it, for us in terms of sort of being able to say, look, we need to move forward with a plan that ultimately can be delivered, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. And as I think you're kind of alluding to, advisory visits, do flag up potential issues.
What's the phrase? Forewarned is forearmed, or something like that. If we have a sense of what the challenges are earlier on, then there's an opportunity for us to work collaboratively, with you through that process to try and resolve them where it's appropriate for us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So written statements, as I mentioned in relation to the process earlier, this is a really, really key way that you can communicate your case, as it were, to the inspector. So written statements, that's in response to the MIQs, and a few kind of tips which are here on the slide. What I want to say about that is, look. So focus on the inspector's questions, because those are the key issues that the inspector has defined for the examination. So don't go off at a massive tangent. Do be really focused. Do be concise. The inspector has an awful lot of material to read through the examination, and including at this stage. So do be concise. And do cross-reference the evidence that you are drawing on as well. So keep your statements, concise, evidence-based, and do address soundness and legal compliance issues, because, as I say, that is exclusively what your inspector is looking at. Don't repeat stuff. The inspector, like I say, has an awful lot to read. We don't want repetitive statements. So just keep it, concise, slim, clean, to the point. That's I think that's the key message here, as well as do please submit it by the deadline that the inspector has set out, because that in and of itself can cause all kinds of problems.
So sometimes sort of less and more concise is better.
I think almost all the time. Yeah, almost all the time. You don't get extra points for writing more.
I'm just going to cover this form. Obviously, on part of that slide, that the process that we follow through, the hearings process, as Simon mentioned, really, really integral and important. Just to say that there are different options here. And we know that in-person hearings are favoured. We know that they're favoured by local authorities. They are favoured by our inspectors generally as a better way to engage on complicated issues, and we get that. But I think I just wanted to also highlight the role that virtual could play, particularly maybe if we've got a smaller point. I don't know if you've seen this, Simon, you've done this, where we've got a smaller issue to resolve. Getting together to resolve it is the right way. But I think consciously, and as we move to a new system, that kind of speed point is key. That if holding an in-person hearing delays something by 4 weeks, and we can hold a virtual next week and still get the outcome, then let's look at that. And some of our inspectors are starting to request that. I was speaking to an inspector the other day who said, we're facing a 400-mile round trip for an hour meeting. Well, it's as we get towards that stage where we're getting more plans in, the use of those virtual sessions when appropriate, I think, is something that we just wanted to flag. It can happen, it does work on some issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what everyone on the call thinks about this, but I think by and large, I mean, not completely 100%, but by and large, most inspectors would generally favour in-person sessions, because they can be more productive, I think, in terms of grappling with the main issues, the really difficult issues. But yeah, with some of the smaller issues, you know, a virtual session at the end of the main kind of in-person sessions is becoming a more kind of common feature, I think. Yeah. So some of this is going to sound obvious, but it doesn't necessarily always play out this way in real life. So, you know, if you are participating in the hearing, you know, do make the most of your opportunity. And that starts with knowing your key points, you know, so understanding your evidence, understanding the issue in hand, and understanding your position on it. So, like I say, that sounds like fairly sort of fundamental, basic stuff, right? But quite often, or certainly sometimes anyway, that can be a problem in hearings if parties are represented by someone who is a bit unsure. And do focus again on the inspector's questions directly. I know that, you know, there might be lots of other things that you want to say, but the inspector's questions that have been clearly set out, those are the things that the inspector's interested in. Okay, so those are the things that you need to focus on dealing with. Again, do be clear, you know, about your evidence, and make, you know, reference that as well when you are making your points at the hearings. And again, do make them efficiently, be concise, do get to the point, no waffling. So, and as well, you know, do identify in the run up to hearings any opportunities that there might be for collaborating. You may find that there are other parties that want to make exactly the same point as you, depending on, you know, where you're coming from. And there may well be opportunities there to sort of work with them, because, you know, again, the inspector does not want to hear repetitive points. So, you know, do consider collaborating if it looks like that might be possible. So, you know, this is what the inspector's looking for when he or she is sitting there at the front of the room, filled with participants. And it's really sort of the same sort of flip side, or the same as, you know, what I've just said about, you know, making your points at the hearing. You know, the inspector needs, you know, a clear understanding of the issues and of your position on each of those issues, which is why, frankly, if you labour points or waffle on, frankly, there's the possibility that the fundamental point you're trying to make could get lost. So the inspector needs to be able to leave the room with no doubt in his or her mind about what the issues are and the position of all parties on each of them. As I've said, you know, the inspector will be entirely focused on legal compliance and soundness, and will also want to know what parts of the evidence base every party around the table is relying on. I would say as well, particularly, so a number of participants will be seeking modifications to the plan. And if the inspector is in the position where he or she agrees that those modifications might need to be made, the inspector then needs to think about, well, okay, if I make that change, what does that mean for the rest of the plan? Does it have any knock-on effect on the rest of the plan? So you can really help your inspector, frankly, by identifying any sort of knock-on implications that there might be, and suggesting solutions to help the inspector. You know, so that's constructive suggestions for resolving those soundness problems more widely. And yeah, this ought to go without saying, really. Isn't that often a problem, I'm happy to say, but, you know, do be professional and engage with the inspector and all parties that are sitting around the table respectfully. Not often a problem, but just occasionally.
It's a worthwhile reminder, isn't it?
Yes.
So for all parties, I guess.
Yeah, so main modifications, I mean, inspectors can only recommend them if asked to by the local planning authority, which I think almost invariably the authority will want the inspector to do that. I don't think there have been any instances where they've not that I can recall anyway. So be clear in your mind about what changes you want, what changes you are seeking, if that's where you are coming from in relation to the examination, and whether that change is a main modification, because that's what the inspector has to focus on, and so it's a main modification if it is necessary to render the plan sound. The inspector isn't there to improve the plan. I'm not sure there's any such thing, frankly, as a perfect plan, and the entire exercise isn't focused on producing something that's absolutely perfect. So do be very clear in your mind about whether what you're asking is a main modification or not, because if it's not, you ought not be trying to press it on the inspector, because the inspector isn't going to deal with that. So yeah, I mean, substantial changes. This does sort of go into a pretty kind of difficult area, but where substantial changes are needed, and particularly where those mean or have rather knock-on implications for the plan, can end up in a plan that's pretty different from the one that was submitted in the first place. So when you're in that kind of situation, the thing that goes through the inspector's mind really is this so different that actually it would be better, it would be right for the plan to be withdrawn and brought back to examination as quickly as possible. That will depend on the scale, nature of the changes involved, but I thought it worth just kind of flagging that. And yeah, so don't forget, and the inspector will remind the local authority of this anyway, that a sustainability appraisal may well be required in relation to main modifications. Yeah, that ought to be, well, ideally at least, should be present and available to view when the main modifications go out for public consultation.
I probably should have said as well at the beginning, I think we're sharing these slides, aren't we? So there's loads of great information in your slide, Simon. People are probably scribbling down. Apologies, I should have covered at the beginning. We might have covered in the chat that we will share these slides with everyone. So you've got a bit of a sort of a repository of all that information that we've gone through. So apologies for not mentioning that earlier on. I'm going to take this one, moving on to programme officer role. So I think those of you who've been through the examination process before, and I'm conscious that we might have people from local authorities who are maybe new in terms of the local plan teams who haven't done a lab examination before. The role that the programme officer plays, I'm quite new within the Planning Inspectorate to support and working with the local plans team, and I was really surprised actually about this programme officer role. And I think it's really clear, everybody speaks so highly of an efficient programme officer can save an awful lot of time, being that conduit between the inspector and the local authority.
It's quite a niche market.
Yeah,
niche job.
It is a niche job, but it's a really, really important job. And that's kind of what I was just going to cover really with this, is that the importance, I guess, of securing a programme officer before you start the examination process is absolutely key. That's something that we look at. Also overlaying that to what I mentioned earlier on about the growth in local plans in terms of the numbers that are going to be coming in. So you just mentioned it's a niche market. There's some fantastic programme officers out there. If you haven't appointed as programme officer and you need some support, we can provide a list of people. We don't endorse the individuals, but we can provide a list of people who are out there. We also know there's a lot of local authorities who look to maybe recruit that role within. So it may be someone from a democratic services background, for example, we've seen before, or someone who is, independent in a sense of they haven't been involved in actually formulating the plan. Yeah. But they may be within the council. So I also just want to kind of make a real clear pitch for sort of remember the 5th of November, isn't it? Wednesday, 5th of November, we've got programme officer training on. as our next program officer training, we will be doing a lot more of these. So our program officer training, we will train people in what we look for in a program officer, the role that they deliver, how they can do that, productively, etc. And that's free of charge. So we deliver that. So if there are people who, particularly local authorities who are recruiting within, who they are not recruiting an established program officer, we do training. And we'll keep promoting that through our social media channels month by month. I don't quite know when the next session will be after November, but we will be doing more in the lead up to that December date that we've touched on earlier on. So I don't know if you've got any reflections, Simon, but some very great people out there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, there are. There is a cohort of professional program officers. Although I would say, which I think is what you're suggesting, Andrew, that if you don't want to go down that route and you want to grow your own, then our PO training may well be a helping hand in that regard.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not a mandatory thing. Personal reflection is maybe it should be, but it's certainly there and it's free. And we would welcome more people to do it, because I think it means then anything that we can deliver that means a slicker, easier examination process for us and for you is what we want to do. And this is part of that. I think it is something that will certainly help.
I suspect you had them at free.
Maybe had them at free. We don't pay people's travel and subsistence, but the training is free. So make a big push for that. And just another thing, I guess, the sort of the tools that sit behind the examination process, the examination website as well. I don't necessarily need to go through all the points on this slide. They're there, you can see them. But I think the examination website, treat this as kind of the main treat it as the inspector's site, I guess. It's kind of the main resource that our inspectors use to access information. So, there's loads of great examples out there about examination websites, and some good examples of, some great ones where people can actually, no more than 3 clicks to any document, making things easy to actually find, naming them appropriately so it's obvious what people are looking at. And we do have some quite detailed guidance as well on the establishment of examination websites, and no doubt program officers can support in some structuring of that as well. But I guess from your point of view, Simon, a really important resource and not one to overlook.
Oh, it's absolutely essential. And I think one of the main messages there is if you're the local authority, because you will be hosting the website, it's easy to forget that it's easy to treat it as your own, but don't think of it that way. Much better, I think, to treat it as the inspector's website, because what can happen is that if you treat it as your own and you put new evidence-based documents up there, and the inspector doesn't know about it, that can cause, frankly, all kinds of pickles. And also really annoy the inspector that he or she is literally the last to know about something new that's been put up, particularly where it has a significant bearing. So best, I think, to kind of think of it that way. Excellent. Right. So planning reform kind of context then, and I suppose I would say a lot of what we've just sort of said will, particularly in relation to examination, etc., or pretty much all of what we just said, if I'm honest, will be just as relevant, I think, in the new system that is coming towards us as well. This is just a bit of context, really. And this is about the stuff that is coming predominantly from the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, the LURA. Where hopefully most people on this call will know that kind of introduces, as a consequence of the LURA at least, a new gateway approach for examinations is being introduced, and we're going to come on and talk about that a little bit shortly.
It probably reflects kind of that planning is a bit more front and centre in sort of government policy, isn't it? Lots of significant bills that change the delivery of the system.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I think you've got two things that give me heart, actually. One is spatial development strategies. actual sort of strategic planning is going to be a thing again, which I suspect that most kind of planning practitioners will very, very warmly welcome. Certainly I do. Lots of challenges, right? But in theory, in principle, strong personal support from me on that. But yeah, so that puts that part of the development plan really, really kind of at the heart of the whole thing. But the new gateway approach as well, I think, demonstrates the continued importance of local plans at the heart of the system and the government's commitment to it. Actually, so
absolutely.
I'm not going to talk about digital examination processes there,
covering that in a minute.
And I'm hopeless at IT, so
we'll lead on to the next one. I think the next slide. I think I'm going to cover a little bit on the gateway system. So, I think it's fair to say, obviously, we've been working with MHCLG very closely on the design of the new gateway system. It's something that we're meeting with weekly. In fact, we have an away day tomorrow with the team there to sort of continue some of the detailed work we've done. We don't have all the answers yet. I think obviously it's clear that the government MHCLG colleagues have kind of made it that they're sort of hope their ambition is to launch the system later this year. We don't have exact dates yet, but there's considerable work underway. I think in terms of sort of what's out there on this, I wouldn't get too concerned about this. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I think there's some really good information on this that is in the public domain from the government's consultation response that was done sort of back in February. I think we might try and put that in the chat because that gives a real sense of kind of the position. Lots of people consulted, I think 400, 500 people part of that consultation who talked about their thoughts, ideas, concerns, pros for the gateway system. So that document really summarises kind of what we would expect and what we're working on. But I'm just going to quote from a line from that document. It talks about the gateway assessments will be flexible and supportive process with regard to targeted at those areas of the plan preparation which pose the greatest risk of soundness and legal compliance. So I think it's quite clear, it's out there that there's 3 gateway processes, 2 of which PINs will pick up, Gateway 2 and Gateway 3. And I think it's important to see that as, for me, I see it as a bit of a funnel in terms of sort of starting out quite broad and actually sort of getting into the detail as we get more towards examination. So Gateway 1 is something that local authorities will do as a self-assessment. That's outlined in the consultation document. But 2 and 3 will be our first sort of opportunity to really sort of work with local authorities on the plan. So get Gateway 2 followed by Gateway 3 into examination as quickly as we can go through that process. So for me, I wouldn't necessarily get kind of too bogged down in the gateway system because the system is there to drive how the examination process works. You as local authorities, speaking predominantly to that audience, you have an area of, you have your district, your borough, your area to deal with. You have growth ambitions, you have political challenges to navigate, you've got housing numbers to look at, you've got policies to develop. Whatever system sits over that's the same. I think the system that we're looking at hopefully will be smoother. It will drive faster examinations is the plan, and there'll be a lot more information on this over coming months. So maybe we do another webinar when we have more information about that operation. But yeah, it looks it should be quite an exciting process.
Just I suppose one thing that I'd want to add in relation to Gateway. So we don't have certainty yet about precisely what the sort of requirements for the gateway inputs, the stuff going into the gateway, each of the gateways will exactly look like. I would say though that for me, I think Gateway 2 is the big opportunity for local authorities to get advice from an inspector who's had a decent amount of time to look at quite a lot of the evidence and whatever there is whatever the documentation there is that has come into that gateway. So I would strongly recommend to local authorities, to absolutely make the most of Gateway 2 and do have as much of your evidence or your draft plan or whatever ready for your inspector to look at, because frankly the more your inspector can look at then the better, the more helpful they can be to you.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I think sits alongside the kind of new system, the gateway system, is obviously that digital transformation that was touched on earlier on. So we've invested heavily within the planning inspectorate in digital roles to kind of look at what we can do in terms of the digital products that will drive, smoother, faster, better examination processes. And obviously, if we're looking at that kind of 30-month end-to-end process, there's clearly economies of scale where digital products can really help with that. So there's awful lot of work ongoing with that. I talked about then on the slide AI pilots. We're looking at kind of AI pilots around how we can use AI in terms of, some sort of centralized tool that we could support local authorities with. Very early days for this yet, more information to come, but looking at kind of, managing those relevant representations, but also doing something that has got that sort of, I guess the sort of public trust and resilience built behind it as well, that if AI tools are going to be used to speed processes up, that it also has to be quite transparent in terms of people who are making representations. So that's an area of work that we're looking at. We don't have the answers yet, we don't have a firm position, but there's lots of work going on in that regard. The area I really want to focus on in this slide, and maybe set you kind of a little bit of homework if you haven't done this yet. I'm sure you have, but there is a site that the government have developed, that MHCRG colleagues have developed, that we know as CULP. That's the sort of the phrase that's been used. And CULP stands for, as it's on the slide, create and update a local plan. So that's becoming kind of a central repository for all things local plan. And some really good stuff on there. Digital citizen engagement toolkit to support site selection for development. There's case studies around use of digital planning. There's some really good material on there, and that's only going to grow as more information comes out. So, spend 10-15 minutes sometime having a look at CULP and get familiar with that site. Some really good stuff on there. Yeah. Transition, Simon, over to you. We've talked about the new system. We haven't really talked about where people, when this starts for people, have we?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for mentioning.
That's all right.
When it starts, brilliant. I think we don't have as yet any actual official confirmation of when it will start. But I think suffice to say that there is a keenness to press the go button on the new system as soon as possible. During the transition period, the idea is that there will be a period of twin tracking. So there will be authorities preparing plans in the current system, which we've come to call the classic system for some reason, but in the current system, and there will be other authorities preparing plans under the new system as well. So both types of plan we may well see coming into the inspectorate for examination at the same time. So, and as well, we're already, we are presently in a situation where we have, various versions of the MPPF in play as well in relation to examinations, and that's something that looks set to continue. And as well, there's the relationship, between the local plan and an SDS. So, an SDS is being drawn up. What does that mean for you if you're a local authority? Should we sort of wait? Should we hold back on drawing up a local plan so that we can see what the SDS is like? It's a difficult period. It's a really, really difficult period. We understand that. It's going to be a difficult period for us as well. But if I can move on to the next slide. So just a couple of things to flag, really. So if you're looking to prepare a plan, you do have to choose a track, sort of harking back to the trains that were on the previous slide. You do have to choose a track. You are not going to be able to sort of straddle those tracks and do something like statutory consultation now for the new system that doesn't yet exist, which will cause some well, it will give some authorities, I think, pause for thought. For some authorities, I suspect it's going to be obvious, it's going to be easy. It's ultimately going to depend on where you are with your plan making, when you last adopted a plan, how up to date your plan is. So that isn't going to be easy, but I think our message, a clear message we want to get out there is, don't dither, because if you do and you don't make a choice, well, as the slide says, that choice is going to be made for you because it's a narrowing window. We don't know exactly, the exact dates and stuff like that, but clearly there is a narrowing window in relation to submitting something in the current system. So if the current system might be an option for you, don't dither. Get on with it and make your decision either way. Whether you're going to go for your next plan in the current system, or whether you are looking at new system, don't stop planning. That is a clear message from government, and I would absolutely echo that. Don't stop planning.
There's things you can do either way.
Yes, there are. And I'm going to come on to that. But also, please do keep us at the Planning Inspectorate informed as well on precisely what it is that you're doing. We're going to have our own challenges in the future, including in relation to resourcing examinations. So the more data, the more intel that we have directly from local authorities, the more prepared and ready we can be.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, there's quite a bunch of stuff that you can't do in relation to the new system. You can't start doing now. That doesn't mean though that you are you're grounded. There are you can get things off the ground. So I'm just going to give you a few examples on this slide and next. So you can do early scoping work, looking at the issues that your plan is going to need to address, looking at baseline data to see, frankly, what issues your next plan will need to address. You can look at your evidence base. Are there any gaps in it? Is there evidence that you can start to draw up, that you can start to draw up now? If there is, that is something that you are going to be able to, you are allowed to do. Best though to focus on areas that are clearly going to be sort of non-abortive, because nobody wants to be spending time and or frankly money on abortive work. So you can also think about engagement, precisely how you are going to engage with communities, businesses, and everyone else involved in your local plan. And also think about, I'm not going to dwell on this because, as I've already mentioned, I'm not very good with IT things, but you can also start to think about what your digital engagement might look like, and I guess how some of your sort of digital systems that you're going to use to support you in your plan making, what that might look like as well. You can also, because you're going to need to do this in the new system, you're going to have to do a lot more work that you can demonstrate around project management. There's going to be a more of an emphasis on transparent project management timelines and that kind of thing in the new system. So do start thinking about that, and resourcing and governance. So what do your governance arrangements look like? You're going to be under, if you're a local authority, the expectation from government is the sort of 30-month end to end from commencement to adoption for local plans. Within that, the 6-month a 6-month examination period. Well, it's pretty obvious that within that, for some authorities, that's to have any hope of achieving that's going to mean putting in place quite different sort of governance arrangements than those that exist at the moment. So you can start looking at that and start looking to make changes in governance where need be. Yeah, so we have there the quote from the Secretary of State, and I've put on the slide there was a difficult, I'm not sure I can bring myself to say this, a key message, how the Secretary of State's message, I think, sort of translates in local plan speak, is plan, baby, plan. Again, the message being, don't stop planning.
Yeah.
And
Almost sounds like what's that Journey song? Don't stop believing, don't stop planning. Do a rendition of that, Simon.
yeah, I don't know that one.
Well, yeah,
Everyone will be grateful that I don't know that one.
Don't stop planning.
So Andrew's going to come on now to tell you a little bit about some of the sort of stuff that we are doing to try and be part of the solution, frankly, to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, many people on the call will know that we offer advisory visits. If you're new to local plans, like some people are, then I'll just recap this. We really want, I mentioned at the beginning, that focus around engagement. Simon's mentioned about dialogue with us, no surprises, timescales. We want to help. We want to unblock. We want to advance plans. We want to do what we can. A key tool we've got at our disposal for that is advisory visits. They are free as well. That other point, we seem to do lots of free things, which is good, especially if people take them up. Also, you can have more than one advisory visit in some instances. That might not be appropriate in all cases, but this gives the opportunity. It's obviously a different inspector. An inspector will come out and do an advisory visit. They aren't the same inspector then who undertakes the examination, so you can have that really full, frank discussion with them on the challenges you've got, the problems. How's the evidence looking? Is it robust enough? Where's the advice? We have really upped the ante on advisory visits. I know there's a few people maybe on the call who are waiting for an advisory visit, but we're going to program those as quickly as we can. We'll train more inspectors in delivering them if we need to. But yeah, I'd just make a real plea that advisory visits is a really important function for us. And those numbers are talked about, that 147 plans that we're still to get in. And we know there'll be some issues in there, and we'd rather deal with them earlier on. That sort of prevention is better than cure. Yeah. Linked to that pragmatism letter, we can't take a plan that isn't ready for examination and fix it. Advisory visits gives us an opportunity to at least explore the issues and explore how we do them. And I think we're seeing that it's quite a valuable tool at our disposal, isn't it? Yeah. An inspector will come out, talk to you, you'll get a report, you'll have something written. It's all kind of a transparent process that you can then look at and use to actually move forward in your examination.
I think, hopefully at least, authorities do find our advisory visits to be really valuable. But I would say this, the value you get out will depend on what you put in. And how you approach it. So to get the best value from it, you really do need to be honest with yourselves to begin with, and honest with the inspector about what you think the potential soundness issues might be, so that you can have a proper kind of candid sort of exploration of the issues and look at potential potential solutions. Yeah,
absolutely. No, just and the in terms of how to request them, where to find them, that the plans admin at planinspector.gov.uk email address is on the slide there. Use that one to contact us for any advisory requests. And then I think sort of one of the final points we just touch on, and this is kind of hot off the press. I think local authorities will have received a letter yesterday. It might not have quite got through to some desks of sort of chief planning officers on the call or sort of local plans managers or whatever, but we have introduced, or we are introducing from 6th of October, a new kind of pre-examination checklist. So this is kind of introduced effectively at that sort of Reg 22 stage, just as local authorities are about to submit the plan, complete a checklist. And that again is looking at that readiness for examination. And it's taken quite a bit of work at our side to get to this, but we felt it was really, really important because again, then it makes sure that, it's a good tool for you from a local authority point of view to assess the readiness for examination, helpful from us as well to look at kind of inspector deployment as we're faced with a scenario of, lots of plans coming in. It's a great tool. There is an opportunity to put things right as well. It's not a sort of total pass fail. It's we'll look at it, we'll come back to you. There's an opportunity to then, look at, adding information in where appropriate. So, we're going to start that work soon. So we'll pilot that. If there's things we need to change, we'll look at that. But that went live yesterday. I think it's been fairly well received from what I've gathered in in kind of, you know, through blogs, etc., that we've seen so far. So, so yeah, so watch for that. If you haven't seen the letter, it will be literally winging its way to you. They were sent out on the 23rd, which was yesterday.
Yeah.
So a new process for us.
Yeah, and do have a look at the checklist, and as well, you know, I think it might be a helpful thing to kind of bring along to your advisory visit.
Yeah,
absolutely. And make what's on the checklist part of the conversation with the inspector.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That's great. And I guess this slide was kind of, we probably don't need to go through all this, do we? We can get some questions, but a useful summary slide there just to kind of pick up, I guess, a lot of the issues that Simon's mentioned around robustness, preparation, approach, yeah, etc. So a good reminder for how to get it right.
Yeah. So now we've got what, about 25 minutes for
we've got some questions. I think this is where we,
as long as they're easy.
Yeah, this is where we rely on the tech. There may be questions that the team behind the scenes have been answering. And also, can I just make a plea as well to look at the poll that we've got as well. So I think we've got a live poll that's to try and drive some future workshops that we'll deliver, which we'll be able to get into the detail of some of these topics more. So they're more topic based in terms of issues that you might be seeing as local authorities. So I'd like you to have a look at that as well, and that'll mean that we're delivering, you know, workshops or future training which is most needed, I guess. So we'll have a look at some of the questions. I'm just trying to find the Q&A tab on my screen. We've got it here. I've just seen one that I can answer straight away. I think there was a question around the advisory visits in the new system. I think we could probably see Gateway 2 as almost an extended advisory visit, almost. That there's a lot more time with an inspector potentially at Gateway 2. So advisory visits in their own right won't maybe continue in the new system. I don't think that's the sort of direction of travel, all to be confirmed. But I think the consensus is Gateway 2 will act almost like as a, you know, give us a lot longer to actually work with you on developing that all the evidence and everything you've got within the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Gateway 2 was inspired by the advisory visit service that we provide.
Yeah, and there's lots more information still to come on that, and we're not absolutely tied down in a way of how it's going to work, what it's going to do, but that sort of themes that. So we've got the first. Can I be question master, because there might be a lot of technical ones that you can. I'll feel your way. We've got the question there. The most sort of voted one is I think sometimes we write too much in response to MIQs because we can't quite work out what angle the inspector's question is coming from. So I need to press the see more button because it's obviously a long question. So if the inspector's question is not clear, we're working in the dark. Do MIQs always have to be phrased as a question? Could there be more signposting of the issue? So there's obviously a learning point and a training point for us there as well. So thanks, Mariana.
Yeah, I mean, I think the inspector's question ought to always be clear. I suggest that what angle the inspector's question is coming from. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend spending an awful lot of time trying to work that out, to be honest. But I think answer the questions as best you can. So how inspectors put their MIQs is frankly a matter for them individually, but in essence they are putting the questions that they require answers to, and they ought to be reasonably specific. I know quite often they will be slightly more, they might be phrased in a bit more of a general kind of way, but I think the danger probably of, as the question suggests, signposting the issues, is that, well, nobody really knows at all what the inspector's getting at or really wants to know. So I think that there might be a danger there potentially in the inspector getting far too much stuff that isn't actually relevant to his or her actual issue, the concern, or the thing that they are, the area that they really want to probe.
Yeah. Okay. I keep looking at the priority question. We've got a question that Jason's asked. It's we have 24 votes. That looks quite high on my list. What will happen in the event of a plan currently in preparation now under the classic existing system, missing the uncertain transition submission deadline? Would you have to start completely from scratch? I mean,
Yeah,
we
not sure I know the answer to that.
I don't think we know that yet directly.
I would say, I would suspect that, I mean, so we are waiting for, for secondary legislation, for regulation to be published. And also, I would anticipate most of this stuff will be in regulation, or quite a lot of it will be in regulation. There will be some other stuff, no doubt, that is in policy and or guidance. But from what we currently know, I would suspect that it wouldn't necessarily be a case of starting entirely from scratch, because it may well be that evidence that you've prepared
It's still relevant.
you can that's still highly relevant. It's just more around the process, and most specifically I think around consultation. So yeah, you may well have to start the process again, but that doesn't mean you're starting from scratch, because you've got your whole sort of your big basket of evidence that you can take with you. I mean, do take this in context. I'm saying this in the absence currently of regulation around this, and that may prove me entirely wrong. But that's the only way I can answer the question for now.
Also, I think what's helpful to us, these kind of questions are helpful for us to then talk to our colleagues about and say, when we go live with information and when we go live with new processes, then these are the kind of questions and issues that you're concerned about. So it makes sense for us to try and make sure they're answered in that guidance and procedural guidance that comes out. So even if apologies if we can't answer some of these questions, but it's still helpful to hear them. I think it's probably a good message.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we'll try and capture all of this stuff that we can't answer, and we'll take some of these issues. We'll take these issues up with the HCLG.
Yeah, and we've got a question from Heidi that's been upvoted 19 times. How can inspectors consider issues such as the publication of national development control policies during the examination process? I don't know if that's one for you, Simon.
So during the examination process, so if you submit a plan tomorrow, for example, under the current system, then that will be examined, against the current NPPF. If it happens that national development management policies are published during that examination, well, I don't think that changes the fact that your plan would be being examined under what is today currently the NPPF. So it ought not have a significant bearing, I would not have thought.
Right, okay, thanks for that. The next question we've got from Luke. If it is recommended that a plan be withdrawn from examination for new evidence to be prepared, does that necessarily entail that the plan preparation to be reset to the start of the process, i.e. sort of pre-Reg 19 or Gateway 1 under the new system?
Okay, I mean, that's a legal compliance question, and I would recommend the authority in that situation take legal advice. My suspicion, I'm not a lawyer, but I think the answer is yes, because you will need to meet all of the statutory requirements for plan preparation.
We've got a question from Luke as well.
Is this one for you?
Might be for me. This is really topical, this one, Luke. And you should have been in a meeting with us yesterday. Do you know whether it would? Do you know whether it would be the same inspector for both gateway checks? We're working that through, I think, at the minute. There's a benefit in our eyes around Gateway 2 and the examination being different. We do that now. We have the impartiality issue. There's the sort of the fact that there's that open dialogue. There's a way of delivering that. There's also then a counter challenge. Sorry.
Yeah, just thought one way that I can answer this,
go on then,
without saying too much, is that so if you think about Gateway 2 being the new system equivalent of our advisory visits. So if an inspector does an advisory visit currently, he or she will explicitly not do the examination. And the reason for that is around the Frank's principles of openness, fairness and impartiality, and those are the guiding principles for all inspectors. And if you've had an advisory visit, you will know that that entails authority officers, whoever from the local authority, talking to the inspector, frankly, in a closed room, with the inspector's task explicitly being to assist the authority. So we take the view that it would not be fair or impartial for the inspector to then go on and examine the plan. Precisely how that's going to work in relation to the new system and the operation of Gateway 2, we currently don't know.
Yeah, the one thing that we are really fairly clear on and are really keen on is that closeness between Gateway 3 and the examination.
Yeah.
So, you know, thinking about Gateway 3 almost being like a kind of checklist process. Is everything ready? Are we there? And then that inspector knowing exactly what they're getting, and that time lapse between Gateway 2 and Gateway 3, and the examination being quite tight. That's something that we do feel there's real value in doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a live issue at the minute, and one that will be ironed out through the publication of more information.
Absolutely. I mean, I know from talking to authorities, as I sort of occasionally do, that some at least are quite keen that you should have the same inspector examining your plan who has done the Gateway 2 assessment, and I can understand how there would be some efficiency there, and I know that authorities are particularly keen on the point around consistency. I suppose one thing to point out though is that first up, it may or may not be the case that actually submitting a draft plan into Gateway 2 is a requirement. We don't know yet. So Gateway 2 could be a thing where there is no draft plan. But in addition to that, there is also part of the new system will involve a significant public consultation between Gateway 2 and the examination. So the point there being that between Gateway 2 and actually an examination, what exists in terms of the plan and the evidence and the consultation responses to all of that will in all likelihood change very significantly between Gateway 2 and examination. So I suppose the question is, well, does it really matter in that sort of context whether you have the same inspector or not? And that, as Andrew suggests, is an issue we are grappling with at the moment.
It's very much a live issue, and more details to follow. I think that's in the sort of you'll hear more basket. Just trying to get a few more questions in before we finish. We've got a question there from Richard. Will it be PINS inspectors inspecting the new supplementary plans, which is understood will need to be examined, or will we need to appoint another suitably qualified independent person to undertake the examination? You know the answer to that one?
Well,
I'm not sure on that one. Or is that in the sort of watch this space bucket?
It is potentially a little bit. So the LURA doesn't specify that it would be an inspector in the way that legislation, the terms that legislation uses when it actually means an inspector. The LURA is more open-ended than that. I don't know whether there might be an issue around whether or not it's a service in effect that we're going to provide in the future. I think, I probably can't answer that at the moment. I mean, certainly in theory and in law, it could be an inspector. The question is probably an operational one. And certainly, I think from our perspective, because, like as with local authorities, we have, challenges around resourcing as well. So we may well have to look at that in due course in the light of, the resource implications of doing all of the actual local plan stuff.
We've got a question from Mary. Are there details around the secondary legislation for PINS gateways prior to submission, or is that going to wait until after transitional arrangements crop of LPs, of local plans?
Sorry, I'm just other secondary legislation for PINS gateways. No. So no. Like you, Mary, we are also eagerly awaiting the publication of regulation, which I think I mentioned earlier. We'll put, we'll set out a lot more of that legal skeleton, that legal framework for around how all of this should function in law, but also don't necessarily expect every little last detail to be in the regulation. I think you'll be disappointed if you do. There will be other stuff, the meat on the bones, as it were, if I can put it that way, may well be through policy and guidance.
We've got a question from Rebecca. Should a programme officer be appointed prior to the gateway assessment? That's an interesting one, and probably yes. I think certainly sort of gateway 2 stage onwards. Obviously, when when it's fully designed and out there, I think that is it will be a reasonably chunky kind of process, won't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll pick. That's a good question. One that we'll pick up in kind of our procedural guidance that we're starting to draft. So, but consensus at the minute, I think, is yes, that would be sensible. Maybe not earlier than that. I don't know, but gateway 1 is kind of self-assessment stage. But you may want to local authority is able to appoint a programme officer, I guess, at any time. But certainly, I think before gateway 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think gateway 2 is kind of like a critical point, a point in the process. I mean, having a PO at that point in time may well be a very, very sensible thing to do.
Yeah, we've got a few resource type questions coming up as well now. I think we've got a few more.
You mean?
Well, for both of us, maybe we'll see. Owen, this is a question from Sam. Owing to forthcoming resourcing pressures at the planning inspectorate and the risk of abortive work by LPAs, is the planning inspector advising LPAs whether their LDSs for preparing new local plans under the existing regime are realistic? I think that's something we can, obviously the new checklist will sort of help that a little bit. We've got advisory visits. I would encourage, I'm not sure we've seen anything yet that we would kind of question. We're very much sort of, I guess you need to think about, is it realistic?
In the statutory sense, certainly that's not something for the inspectorate. In terms of advice, yeah, I mean, we do have a decent idea of how long it takes to do most bits of work that are involved in putting a plan together. And if you do want any advice about that, then that is something that you can raise at an advisory visit. But bear in mind, you know your own resource better than the inspector does, both in terms of how long it's likely to take your staff to do a thing, or how long it's going to take you to appoint somebody else to do it.
Yeah. I've just realised that on some of these questions there's actually a response already there, which I hadn't realised. So the team behind
really
been responding. So I hope we've been consistent, because if we haven't, it's looked at. But I was just going to flag the other resource question Stephen just mentioned there. There's the answer there, but this is occupying a lot of our time in terms of capacity, resourcing pressures. I mentioned obviously the amount of plans we're going to get, the campaigns we've done to increase our inspector base, but we're really resourcing our service to deal with the anticipated workloads of both delivering gateways in the new process and examinations in the existing. You can all really help us there by not all submitting on the 31st of December, if I'm quite honest. So, if we were able to get plans in under the existing system in October, November, as opposed to December, that all helps, because it helps the sequencing of our inspectors. So that the team have kind of answered that one. I've answered the one that Sue mentioned already, and there's a few responses already in there. So There's a question that Rebecca asked about essays. That's in there as well. That's been responded to. Can we post a link for the program officer training? Yes, absolutely we can. I think that's in the chat there. So anybody who wants to look at program officer training, look at the question that Zara asked, and in the response there, we've got the program officer training there. We're kind of nearly to time, Pete, aren't we? So I think we've just got a quick wrap up we want to do. If there's any, and also I'll say if there's any questions we haven't got around to, if there's a particular individual one, obviously this isn't the right process to talk about examinations or live casework or anything, but if there's anything else you want to ask, by all means contact us and we'll aim to answer it. So I think I just wanted to sort of finish off by obviously thanking you for attending, to encourage you to look at the poll, because this will drive the priority of some of the topics that we want to cover in the future. So this may be the start of, this is the wide funnel bit of like lots of things we might do in terms of training and guidance and help that you all might need as you move through your plan through to examination. Just some of the resources as well that are available. I haven't mentioned PAS much in this presentation, and that's not deliberate. PAS do a fantastic job. They've got some great material out there, and they've got a great site. If you haven't seen it as well, the link's in the final slide there. Get ready to make a plan in the new system. So they've already got some sort of material that they're starting to look at. I talked about the CULP site, create or update a local plan. That's in there. Program officer training and guidance. There's a link. I think these are all links, aren't they, Pete, in the slide? Yes, I don't want to do people disservice of saying it's a link. It's not. They're there. So when we circulate these slides round, then we'll make sure that this is there for you. So the pre-examination checklist information is in there as well. So hopefully the main things we've covered today, there's a reference point for you. But if in doubt, contact us. We're keen to engage. We're only going to be able to deliver this by working together. So that's what we're aiming to do. So I think we're pretty much at time. So I don't know if we're okay to call it there. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope you found that useful. We've also got a feedback form on there, so that's helpful to us to know what you found useful, what you didn't, what you want more of, what you want less of, and then we'll look at that. So thanks for that, and thanks to the people behind the scenes as well who've been helping us with the questions in the organisation. Thanks so much.
And do keep on planning.
Keep planning, yes.
Thank you.
Don't stop planning. That's the message. Don't stop planning. Yeah. Thanks for that. Bye.